our notion that this has been happening all along. In a story released that was titled "The NSA's Hidden Spy Hubs in 8 U.S. Cities," they basically detail how the NSA has been using AT&T seemingly willingly to conduct their mass surveillance, and they've been using other telecommunication providers who pass data through AT&T as well. The cities in question are Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, New York City, San Francisco, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. They've identified one building in each city that contains network equipment to transport large quantities of internet traffic across America and the world. I mean, they found classified NSA documents, they found public records, they had interviews with a lot of AT&T former staffers, and the verdict is that AT&T was helping the NSA with their mass surveillance, where they've been collecting phone records, email records, online chat records. I mean, the documents collected have been posted up on a link that I'll leave below, but it shows how the NSA not only trusts and uses AT&T for their mass surveillance because they cooperate so well, but AT&T also has relationships with other phone and internet providers that the NSA can exploit, and that's what they love about it. They love that AT&T has these connections that can be like doorways for the NSA into other telecommunication providers. Now, to be clear, the reason that these AT&T buildings in particular were singled out is not just because every AT&T building is being utilized directly by the NSA. It's because these 8 buildings in particular were considered to be backbone facilities because they A, process AT&T customers' data, and B, they handle a large influx of data from other service providers. Not every AT&T building does that. The Intercept actually names some of the other companies tied in with AT&T, and they include Sprint, Cogent Communications, and Level 3, as well as foreign companies such as Sweden's Telia, India's Tata Communications, Italy's Telecom Italia, and Germany's Deutsche Telekom. But again, there's only 8 of these facilities in the US that the bulk of this data is passing through. And from the documents collected, the NSA admits that they highly value this partnership with AT&T, not just because of cooperation, as I've already mentioned, but because of the way that AT&T can get the NSA into other telecommunication providers. Not to mention, users of the foreign telecommunication providers are the ones mainly at risk because, remember, the NSA spies on foreign countries' targets because the foreign country often can't do it themselves for legal reasons. And it's the same thing here in the US, okay? The US government will get some organization like GCHQ from the UK to spy on our citizens in case the NSA can't legally do it. But, I mean, hey, the NSA can basically get anything that they want and make it seem legal. I mean, the really concerning thing about all this to me is that having a mass surveillance state is a key characteristic of a tyrannical government. And I'm not attempting to reduce the entire scope of events leading to a tyranny as just being a mass surveillance state. But I'm saying that it's a step in the process. And given what else the deep state has done, I mean, it's pretty clear that they're not motivated by a care for the sovereignty of the individual. I mean, every action that they seem to be taking is toward a philosophy that yields the worst results for man. Mainly, no freedom under a collectivist police state. I mean, that's what they're aiming for, and it's clear in the way that the government intel agencies are coordinating their moves. The NSA is also pushing its data to a cloud, essentially creating a singular environment in which all of the data that they collect can be analyzed. I mean, they're ramping it up to make their analysis of data more efficient, and presumably to handle an ever-increasing volume of data. I mean, with more people owning more devices and the NSA having more avenues to collect data, they need to ramp it all up. And the AT&T NSA collusion has been going on for quite some time now, but moving their data to a cloud for more efficient storage and the ability to more efficiently sift through everything is pretty new. I mean, I mentioned it in my last video because I was like, oh, I can't possibly cover all these stories, but I didn't expect that the next story I'd be covering is on the NSA. So, here we are. But moving on with this AT&T NSA story, the way that this system is set up, I mean, the data exchange between AT&T and other service providers, it takes place through a third-party company outside of AT&T. And then that information, or at the least the bulk of that information, is run through a backbone facility where the NSA is tapping in. And there was a spokesperson for the NSA that actually said they're following all the laws, but we've heard that one before, and I'm not gullible enough to believe it again. And I don't think I was gullible enough to believe it the first time, but there was an AT&T spokesperson who said that AT&T is required by law to provide information to the government and law enforcement entities by complying with court orders, subpoenas, lawful discovery requests, and other legal requirements. They also provide voluntary assistance to law enforcement when a person's life is in danger and in other immediate emergency situations. In all cases, we ensure that requests for assistance are valid and that we act in compliance with the law. I don't like how vague other immediate emergency situations seems to be here. I mean, I hate to cherry pick, but we've seen loopholes get abused before, okay? We see vague language get reinterpreted beyond its original intention. I mean, it happens with the Constitution and the Supreme Court, okay? It happens with companies in their mission statements, even though mission statements aren't necessarily legally binding, but still. I mean, we saw it happen with the Meteor investigation. I mean, the FBI abused loopholes to allow their bias to make judgment calls that led to the exoneration of Hillary. But even throughout all of this, there was, I mean, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but there was something that was a bit refreshing to hear. The CEO of Cogent Communications said that if the NSA was trying to monitor data passing across AT&T's network, he'd be extremely concerned. But again, it's all just talk. I mean, he also said that he knew nothing about it, which means that he's either lying or AT&T is walking on eggshells and possibly breaking the law because they didn't let other providers know about how their customers' data is being funneled to the NSA. Now, the New York Times actually reported on this back in 2015. They say that AT&T started working with the NSA back in 2003. And if we can remember how exactly AT&T started, all of this starts to make so much more sense. I mean, it all started in the late 1800s. AT&T was started as American Telephone and Telegraph, which, hence the shortening to AT&T. And that was after being a part of the Bell Telephone Company. And American Telephone and Telegraph then broke into four major parts. And there were the AT&T long lines, there was the Western Electric Company, there were Bell Labs, and there was the Bell Operating Company. And Bell Labs should sound familiar because it was part of the government, the military specifically, and even more specifically, DARPA. I mean, this is when DARPA started to dig its roots into Bell Labs. And in 1987, the DARPA Mimic program was opened up, which ended up giving birth to Google, which became a prized possession of the NSA. Now, it wasn't until the last day of 1983 that AT&T and Bell actually split. And Bell is now known as Nokia. But in 1985, the NSA began their Fairview operation, which was known for mass surveillance. I mean, the whole purpose of it was mass surveillance. And they've been connected to AT&T since the start. I mean, they even used this Fairview program to spy on UN diplomats in 2012. I mean, all in all, the Fairview program garnered hundreds of billions, if not trillions of documents for the NSA. And I mean, you go back a year before that now, and you're in 2011, and we're looking at the 10-year mark since 9/11, since the 9/11 terrorist attack, and the NSA reportedly spent $189 million on just the Fairview program. So we're paying taxes partially to have them spy on us. Seems fair. Not really, but okay. I mean, there was also a 2006 lawsuit in which a former AT&T employee who worked at the AT&T backbone facility in San Francisco said that he saw NSA equipment in a secret back room in 2003. I mean, that was, as I said earlier, coincidentally the same year that AT&T first assisted the NSA in their live presence on the global net. So it's clear that AT&T and the NSA are inextricably tied together, especially now. And it makes sense when you consider that AT&T was birthed out of the government. I mean, they've been part of the government's conduit to the people since their inception. And now, hopefully, people are starting to wake up to the horrors of what's really going on. I mean, we need to be keeping tabs on this type of power and exposing it. I hope that AT&T loses customers who decide that they don't want to partake in any type of Fairview operation or mass surveillance operation. And I'm sure that Verizon and other providers are involved as well, but now we have unequivocal proof that AT&T is acting as an arm of the weaponized intel agency in the US. And these 8 buildings that the Intercept has identified were confirmed by former AT&T employees as being the facilities that the Intercept is purporting them to be. And to give you an idea of just the absolute unabashed nature of the NSA, they actually talk about a geographic good fortune as home field advantage because the data takes the cheapest path, not the most physically direct. And when the US government has this kind of hold on telecommunication providers, they can make sure that they're the cheapest route, assuring that the vast majority of data in the world will pass through the US where the NSA can monitor it. I mean, that's the scary thing in all this. This isn't localized to the US, okay? The NSA's primary mission is actually to gather foreign intelligence. And Reagan signed an executive order actually allowing the NSA to eavesdrop on communications that originate and terminate in foreign countries. Meaning, if someone in Germany is sending an email to someone in Canada and it passes through a server in New York or California or Texas, the NSA legally has access to that now. And it is still illegal for the NSA to eavesdrop on communications between domestic US citizens without a warrant, but the NSA was illegally wiretapping back in 2005 on communications that either started or ended in the US. Granted, it does say started or ended in the US, so it means it either came in internationally to the US or it's leaving from the US going to a foreign country. But it's also worth mentioning that the NSA has ties to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, which we've already seen has the potential to be immensely corrupt. And just to finish this video off, I mean, it's worth noting that the average citizen doesn't have to worry about this. I mean, no one cares about some funny cat or dog pictures that you shared. No one cares about some benign email that you sent someone or some phone conversation that you had with a relative or a friend. But if they want a reason to go after you, AT&T can give them that reason. I mean, the hyper-efficient cloud storage program that the NSA is using can analyze that reason. And keep in mind, analyzing data isn't the same as illegally using that data for the basis for a warrant, okay? They can analyze your data legally and extract a pattern out of that which may provide the basis for a warrant. So just because they can't use a specific piece of domestic communication without a warrant, it doesn't mean that they're not still collecting your data for the purpose of analyzing it to extract patterns that could possibly raise red flags. I mean, a good example that I thought of with this is I have a friend that I went to college with, and he was studying computer science. And he said in class they taught him how drug dealers get caught through texting. And it's not because law enforcement actually looks at the context of the texts. They look at the frequency of the texts. So if you're texting someone 2 to 3 times just every few weeks or months, that raises a red flag. And I'm worried about the same kind of thing happening here, but on a massive scale. I mean, the NSA will have algorithms designed to catch any number of sketchy patterns that can be explained away as completely benign, but it doesn't matter if they raise a red flag. So I mean, as I said, everything is linked below. Just be careful what information you're putting out onto the internet and what information you're conveying through your cell phone. Also, little PSA, be sure to say goodnight to your resident NSA agent every night. Just, say it into your phone or your webcam. I mean, they have pretty lonely jobs, so I'm sure that they love to be acknowledged for what they do. So that's all for this video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed it and if you found it helpful. Donation, merch, and Patreon links are below.